story that must be told. Here's a little story that must be told. Here's a little story. Here's a little story.
My name is D-Sane. I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm a music producer and audio engineer. You know, I got into music when I was 10 years old. I was in the school band and I started playing clarinet. I tried out for drums, and ironically, the band teacher thought I didn't have enough rhythm to play drums. So they stuck me in clarinet, and that's where I remained for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I grew up in a very musically cultured household. My mom she's from the Midwest, so she listened to a lot of Motown and was like the biggest Elvis freak you've ever met. We had the velvet Elvis paintings all over the house. It wasn't that much of a transition, I don't think, to going from the music that I was already listening to the hip hop. Back when it was you know, the breaking movies, and it was still pretty safe and tame, and you know, especially like a lot of the break dance music, like the techno, LA techno funk and upper tempo, faster tempo type stuff. Mm-hmm. Every kid at my school wanted to learn how to break dance, and we used to get together after school, and all of us would try to break dance in my friends' parents' living rooms and garages, or, you know, wherever we could get together and try to do this. I had the best centipede on the block, man. Herbie Hancock's Rocket, and the scratching that was in it, I was always fascinated by the scratching, and so that was one of the things. I was trying to do that on my mom's old school turntable, you know, 70s, old school 70s record player, like, and they're trying to do the scratching. I have the original Michael Jackson Thriller album picture disc that I got when I was like 10 years old, and Prince's Purple Rain, and I was also into the Romantics, you know, and I was into a lot of different stuff. So here's what happened for me. This is where I got corrupted. My exposure to hip hop early on was like the breaking movies and just what we could get out in North Seattle and on the radio. Mm-hmm. I didn't come to the CD, and I wasn't running around downtown, and so I wasn't running around out here where a lot of it was actually happening at, right? In '86, my mother and I moved to Las Vegas. And we ended up in the hood. And so I'm living in the hood in Las Vegas, and you know, that was like a culture shock for me. And there was some guys that had moved into the neighborhood across the street from me the same day, and they were from LA. And next thing you know, I'm hearing, you know, Ice-T for the first time, 6 a.m. And I'm like, this is dope. Like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, I've heard some East Coast hip hop, but there's West Coast hip hop? I loved East Coast hip hop, but the West Coast, and we're all from the West Coast, so I'm gonna rep the West Coast, you know. You know, then gangster rap came out, and then the 2 Live Crew came out, and then, you know, and I'm secretly in my bedroom listening to the 2 Live Crew stuff, and like, you know, because I didn't want my mom. I knew my mom would flip out. She heard me listening to that shit, and she came home one day, and she caught me listening to it, and got in my ass and was like, look, I already know I can't stop you from listening to this, but just out of respect for me, I don't want you listening to this stuff while I'm home. And I'm like, all right, cool. At that point in time, they were running all the Crips and the Bloods out of LA, so a lot of those guys were coming to Vegas. And so I'm instantly in the middle of the West Coast gang culture and gangster rap and all that. And then, of course, I start running with the street gangs in Las Vegas, and I get completely sucked into all this. But when I moved to Las Vegas, like I said earlier, I had been playing clarinet for 3 years, right? And I never wanted to play clarinet. I always wanted to play drums. So when I moved to Las Vegas, I signed up for band class. And the teacher was like, oh, so what instrument did you play in Seattle? Drums. I play drums. Oh, yeah, I've been playing drums for years. Lied my ass off so I could get on the drums, finally. But it worked out. You know, DJing was real big at that point. Like I said earlier, I'd always been fascinated with scratching and all that stuff. So, and then I owned some records, and I also knew some guys that were DJing. And funny story, you know who used to DJ my middle school dances? That guy Dino, the Summer Girls guy. Summer Girls had a big Summer Girl song. He was a DJ for DJs Unlimited in Las Vegas, and he used to come and DJ my middle school dances. I used to go up there and just sit to watch him DJ. I'm not even out there dancing with the girls. I'm up there watching the DJ, watching what they're doing. What I ended up doing was, so I took my mom's old school record player, and I had gotten another little stereo system, and somehow I hooked them up together, and I was able to figure out that if I flipped the switch between like the phono and the auxiliary, because I would plug the other one into the auxiliary, if I could get that switch to stay right in the middle, I could get sound out of both of them at the same time. So I could actually play two records at the same time and mix them together. It was really, rudimentary, but it worked. So that was my earliest, DJ setup. So I got in a bunch of trouble in Vegas, running around with the street gangs, and went to juvie and was fighting with my mother. And she finally had enough of me and kicked me out. And I went and lived with the neighbors, took me in for a few months, but then eventually they plotted to have me sent back to Seattle to live with my Seattle police officer father. Back then, in the late 80s and early 90s, they were doing all the busing. So I'm going to Ingram High School, but everyone I go to school with is from the CD and the South End. So I'm going to school with all these kids from the hood. So I just got right back in with the same type of people that I was running with in Las Vegas. I actually went to school with Keith Aspie, Ghetto Prez, and Ghetto Prez was part of like LSR back then, they used to DJ our dances and whatnot. Silver Shadow D, we went to school together. I actually have pictures of Silver Shadow D doing our talent shows at Ingram. So I just got right back in with the same crowd that I was running with in Vegas. That was when I got the turntables.
How did you get the turntables?
Funny, you should ask. I was doing a lot of car prowling back then, and me and my friends were out one night car prowling around Northgate, and we came upon a van full of DJ equipment, and I'm peeking in the back window like, yo, they got some Technique 1200 turntables in the back of this thing. Psh. That's how I got my Technique 1200 turntables. And I still have them to this day. Of course, my father was like, where'd you get the turntables? Oh, a friend of mine let me borrow them. He knew they were stolen. And later on, he actually told me, like, we got in a big fight. And he's like, you think I don't know those turntables are stolen? I know they're stolen. But I let you keep them. You know why I let you keep them? Because they keep you at home. Because it keeps you home in the bedroom playing with your turntables instead of out here running the streets. I talked a lot of shit. I still talk a lot of shit. So no one liked me. I was always getting in fights. Hip-hop saved my life for sure. For sure. It went from clarinet to drums to DJing. And also around the same time when I was getting into DJing, my mother had bought me this Casio keyboard that had some drum pads on it. And they were kind of like MPC pads almost. And my music teacher actually let me bring this into class, and instead of playing the live drums, he would let me play the drums on my keyboard. And they didn't work out that well, but my music teacher was cool like that. He didn't immediately shut me down when I asked him about it. I'm getting into DJing and making beats, and also at the same time when I was in middle school, I had one of my friends had just moved here from New York, and this is when the Boogie Down Productions Criminal Minded album had first come out, along with Eric B. and Rakim's Paid in Full album. And he had copies of them and let me borrow them and make copies of them. I'm just getting inundated with all this hip-hop and all this music stuff, and I just kind of gradually was going that direction. I don't think I ever like really was like, I'm going to do music. It just kind of happened. I wanted to be a geologist. When I was a kid, I was fascinated with rocks. I had a big quartz crystal at the house. It's one of the quartz crystals that I stole out of the Shoreline High School or Shoreline Community College geology lab. It's this big giant quartz crystal. It's about this long, big fat crystal. I still have it. It's sitting on my table at the house. Because it was this guy named O.J. Ferrari was his name. And so when I came back from Vegas, I don't know how I ran into him, but I ran into him somewhere, and he was rapping. And he's like, "Oh, you're DJing? I rap now." And I'm like, "Okay, maybe we should try to do some music together. I don't know, you know." And he was like, "I know this other guy who he's got a drum machine." And so he introduced me to this other guy. So the three of us linked up and came together like Voltron or whatever. And the guy who had the drum machine, you know, he was like, "This is my drum machine." I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool." And like, so I sat down and, you know, I already had a keyboard that had drum pads on it, so it, you know, it was not that much of a stretch from going from that to this. He showed me how to, you know, work the sequencer and how to record a beat, put a beat together. That was summer of 1990, and made my first beat. We didn't have multi-track recording back then. We just had the tape decks. So we're like, all right, well, let's do our first song. Here, I made the beat and you rap on it, and I'm gonna do some scratching in the background while you're rapping. Okay, and we'll just hit record and see how it comes out. It came out all right. I still got a copy of that song to this day. It's called "Catch Me If You Can." After that, my friend's mom bought us a 4-track recorder, and so then we started recording on the 4-track. I mean, once I got introduced to a drum machine, that was it. I was like, now I can make beats. Like, you know, a drum machine with a sequencer on it. Like, now I can actually do stuff. That led to my friend's mom, the same mom who bought us the 4-track recorder. She bought us a Casio CZ101 synthesizer. With that synthesizer, you can actually program different synth sounds in it. It came with like a book, and it had all these different patches in it. And so if it'd tell you how to program the synthesizer. And so, at the same time, I'm learning synthesis. I didn't even know it at the time. I'm learning synthesis. You know, I ended up taking synthesis in college when, like 7-8 years later. And I was like, oh, this is all the same stuff I was doing on that keyboard, years ago. The drum machines had MIDI, and you could get some MIDI cables, and you could hook them all up together with the MIDI. And so I figured out how to run the keyboard into my Alesis HR16 drum machine and use the pads on the drum machine to trigger sounds from the keyboard. So it was real basic at the time, but I could do some real simple bass lines, program some real simple bass lines into these beats. And so it wasn't just drums. It wasn't just a kick, snare, hi-hat. We could actually put like a little bass in there or something. And then a lot of it at that point in time, I'm mixing, like I'm doing a lot of scratching and mixing break beats and other samples and stuff in the background of these beats as well. So it was kind of like putting it all together and making something. So I always laugh, like the kids these days, like they have no idea how easy they got it. I'm like, you should have seen what we had to do 30 years ago. I was just doing music with whoever was down to do music. Like for a long time, I was doing music with this guy named Payback. You just meet people when you're out there every day running the streets. You eventually cross paths with other people that are interested in doing music, and like, hey, let's do music. And so we're bringing it back to his house because that's where the studio was at, the 4-track and the drum machines and the turntables and everything. So like, we'd meet these other guys and bring them back to his house and do some music with them. And then eventually I met some guys from the CD, and then I'm up here running around in the CD doing music with CD cats and hanging out on 22nd and Jefferson. And eventually someone introduced me to a couple of the founding members of FTS. I actually knew one of them prior. I'd actually DJed at a party at his house a couple of years earlier. And a mutual drug dealing friend of mine said, "Hey man, you remember Damien?" I was like, "Oh yeah, how's he doing?" "Yeah, he's rapping now. You guys should hook up." So I call him up. "Hey, what's going on, man?" "Yeah, man, we're doing some music." I actually had someone who tried to give me a record deal back in '94. They had this local independent record label, and they had an office and a recording studio in downtown Seattle, in Belltown. They were actually really interested in signing me and a couple of my other buddies from the CD, and they were willing to give me access to their studio in the office building. And so I was spending a lot of time up there, and because around this time I was couch surfing anyway. I was homeless and couch surfing, and so I would just go to the studio and just sit in there all night, make beats, and crash out for a few hours and throw these, beats on tape. They had Cakewalk. That was actually my first time ever making beats on a computer. And they had a bunch of cool keyboards, and it was all they had a much more elaborate setup than I did. I had a couple drum machines in my turntables, but they had this computer sequencer system. And actually, that guy who he actually took me to Jack Straw. They had a sampler, and that was the first time I actually ever made like a sample based beat. When your peer group and your friends and people start telling you, this is kind of dope, like, you're not bad at this. When you start getting encouragement from people who you respect and start getting opinions from people you respect, like, yeah, this is not bad, man. Maybe you should, try to do something with this. All right. I got matching luggage for my 18th birthday from my father. The proverbial matching luggage. He kicked me out when I turned 18. I also had a baby on the way. My baby's mom was 7 months pregnant at the time when I turned 18. And I'm out here running the streets and selling drugs and doing all kinds of bad stuff. And so I was never, I don't know, still doing music, but didn't really take it seriously just because, life gets in the way. Life happens. And then the guy who was trying to sign us to a record deal, we ended up having a fallout with him and over during contract negotiations because I wanted creative control over what we were doing, and he refused to give me creative control. I was like, well, I'm not going to sign a record deal with you then. Why would I sign a deal with you if you're going to tell me how to make the music that I want to make or we want to make? It's just fallout after fallout and moving around and going through this and going to jail. I was in and out of jail all throughout the 90s. And then finally it wasn't until 96 that I got out of jail for like the last time. And I narrowly avoided going to prison. They were tired of my shit. And I had been to jail, King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County. I'd been Linwood. I've been to every jail from here to there and in between, and got in a lot of trouble. And I was on DOC, and they were tired of my shit, and they were like, this is it, dude. You got to get it together, bro. I had to go in for some like drug and alcohol evaluation, and the recommendation came back, and they said that I either needed to start going to AA classes 3 nights a week, or I needed to get back in school. And I was like, I think I'll go to school. So that's when I started going to Shoreline. I ended up enrolling in Shoreline in 97 into the audio engineering program. But, for me at that point, I've already been making music for 6-7 years. Like, it's just an easy A for me. Like, I was majoring in audio engineering, but I was minoring in business. And that's really why I was there, was for the business classes. Because at that point I was like, well, the whole deal with signing the record deal with that guy, didn't work out. But I'm getting pressure from my friends. Like, why don't you just start your own record label? Why don't you just do it yourself? And it just came down to, well, maybe it's time to get out of the streets and go to school and get serious about it. And so I did. I get out of jail. My buddy says, have you talked to Damien lately? He's rapping. No, I haven't talked to him. So I talked to him. I started doing music with them. I'm going to college. We actually recorded the first FTS album at Shoreline Community College while I was a student there. But more than anything, I was just trying to keep my probation officer off my ass because I was on DOC at the time. And they had me on a very short leash. You better get it together or you're going to end up in prison. And nobody wants to go to prison. So, yeah. So that's why I was like, yeah, I think it's time to get serious about this music stuff. FTS started out as me, Smoke Dog, and J-Dub. Just the 3 of us. And then there was a 4th member who was in prison at the time. And so as soon as he got out, we drafted him into the group. It's like when people see a group of people doing things, people kind of start gravitating towards you. And so next thing you know, there's another guy that we run into, Villain. He's one of the other homies that raps a little bit. Okay, cool, come join the crew. And then Villain knows Drama, who was another guy that rapped, who was part of their crew over there on 85th Street. So Drama comes into the fold. Then Brazy J, and then Mad Dog, and the next thing you know, there's 9 of us. And like, we're like the Seattle Wu-Tang Clan. There's 9 people, and at that point, I was rapping too. So I'm making all the beats, and I'd started my record label, and I'm like, let's do it, man. Let's put out an album. You know, we did all the pre-production 4-track stuff at my house, and then just took them to the studio and re-recorded them. What's funny is they actually offered me a job. The music, the Bruce Spitz, he's the head of the music program at Shoreline. He caught on very early that I was kind of game in the system. He was like, "How long you been doing music?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I can tell you've been doing music a while." He's like, "You're acing everything, A plus, A plus. I'm just acing all my classes." And so my teacher's like, and then one day we were in class and Bruce asks, he says, "Is anyone here in a band?" I kind of like raised my hand like, "I'm not in a band, but I'm in a group." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a rap group. I got a rap group." He's like, "Really?" He's like, you got something I can listen to?" And I was like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. We got like a demo, like a 4-track demo of songs that we're actually getting ready to record here in the studio." He's like, "I want to hear it. Bring it to me." So I bring him a CD the next day, and the next day was Friday. He took it home over the weekend and listened to it. And when I come back to school on Monday, he's like, "I need you to stay after class." And I'm like, "Am I in trouble?" And he's like, No, not at all. But I need to talk to you." I'm like, "All right." So I stay after class, and Bruce is like, "So I listened to your CD, man. I loved it." And I was like, "What?" Like, it's all gangster rap. It's like we're all shooting people and pimps and hoes and all kind of. I'm like, "What, bro?" Because this guy's like, he's like a square ass white dude from Miami. He was like a big Jimmy Buffett fan, and I'm like, you like my album?" But he's like commenting about all these things about the album, all that one song, and like he's actually like referring to stuff that's on the CD, pointing out specific things. I'm like, "You really did listen to it?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I loved it, man. It was great." He goes, "Okay, so check this out. So we're starting a hip hop drum programming class." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You want to teach it?" Are you kidding, bro? I was like, "How does that work? I'm a student here." He goes, "Doesn't matter. We can make it work. You want to teach the class?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Let me think about it." Like, and he's like, "Yeah, think about it. Get back to me." Now, in the midst of all this, I'm just finally starting to get off probation. So I'm finally, after 5 years of being on DOC, I'm about to be a free man. And the only reason I'm going to school was to keep my DOC officer off my ass. And so I'm getting ready to drop out is where I'm going. Is like, we're going to record this album, and then I'm pretty much going to drop out of school because I don't have to go anymore. I go back to my teacher, and I'm like, "I'm really flattered, man, but I think I'm going to have to pass because I'm trying to start my record label, and I'm trying to record this album, and I just got too much going on, man." And he's like, "All right, well, if you change your mind, let me know." And I actually ended up taking the class the next quarter, and I dropped out of the class. I went like twice because the kid that they found to teach the class, it was horrible. No, I got introduced to West Coast hip hop, and that's my thing, man. Ice-T, NWA, Dr. Dre, Snoop, E40, Too Short. I like select East Coast hip hop, but I'm definitely more West Coast oriented. My label is Street Level Records. I actually came up with the name of it when I was homeless, living in the streets. In '94, but it didn't officially, start until '98 when I actually got my business license and actually became a licensed business entity. Yeah, so I put out my first album in August of 1998, and the catalog has grown. As far as actual albums that I have put out myself personally, there's the first 2 FTS albums, IK album, Psycho, Birdie. It's probably about 15 albums that I put out personally. But then along the way, I've started ingesting some of my friends' albums into my catalog because I've worked on all these albums from an engineering aspect or production aspect. Like, they're albums that I was involved in, but the guys are just not business savvy enough to maintain a catalog. So I was like, well, hey, why don't you just let me add that to the street level catalog, and I'll, maintain it for you and make, because then it's available to the public. All their music that's been added to the street level catalog is now on all the streaming services, so I maintain all of that for them as well. Overall, there's probably like 30 albums. I do wear a lot of hats from the making the music side and also the business side, and it's not easy. Let me tell you, what else could I be doing? I'd be going to work every day to go work for someone I hate, like at a job that I hate. Like, I love what I do, I've been in some really hard recording sessions with artists. One of the earliest I can remember specifically was Birdie. Rest in peace, Birdie. One of Birdie's best friends got murdered on Christmas of 2000 by his own brother. And he broke down crying in the booth. And, it's just like, yeah, I've had to be there with people when they're, talking about some real deep emotional stuff on their records. And yeah, sometimes you gotta be the shoulder to cry on and comfort them when they come out of the booth, because they're talking about this trauma. Music is an outlet for a lot of people too, and that's the thing, is like, some people have to get these emotions out and express themselves. And who cares if anyone else feels it or even wants to listen? That's not what it's about. It's about releasing these emotions and putting it on a medium. And, if it touches someone else, cool. In your travels, you meet people. And Damien, Smoke Dog from FTS, I think he had met Birdie and his homeboy Stack somewhere, and invited him over, come over sometime, let's do some music. And yeah, I just happened to be over there, and they were freestyling, and Birdie was a cold freestylist, and I'm listening to him rap, and I'm like, and this dude is so dope. They're like, D, put a beat on. Cool, put a beat on. And they just start rapping. But Birdie was just killing this guy in the freestyle. Like, he was killing him. And I'm like, this dude's dope. And I was selling drugs back then. I sold drugs for a lot of years. I had to go do a drop off, and so I had to leave. And so I told Birdie, I was like, man, I gotta go run somewhere. I'll be right back. But you gonna be here? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna be here. So I go run, I come back, and when I got there, he was gone. He had left. I'm asking Smoke, I'm like, where'd he go? He's like, I don't know, he had to take off. I'm like, you got his phone number? Oh, no, I ain't got his number. Fuck. Matter of fact, it may have been a year and a half. It went by before I ran into him again. Ran into him at a house party and was like, bro, I have been looking for you in the broad daylight with a flashlight. Where have you been? I need you to come to the studio. I need you to join the crew, bro. He thought I wanted him to do promotions for us or something. And so I'm like, nah, bro, I want you to come and join the crew and rap. And he's like, for real? I was like, yes. I was like, man, when can you come to the studio? When can you come to my house? And he's like, I don't know, tomorrow? I was like, sounds good to me, man. Got exchanged phone numbers, and he came in the next day. We were working on the FTS Money Motivated album that came out in March of 2000. I've got this song that I wrote. I made the beat. I came up with the concept for it. I handpicked who I wanted to be on the song, and I wrote the hook, but I wanted someone to sing it, and we didn't know any singers at the time. He was like, well, I can kind of sing. And I was like, well, why don't you go kind of sing in the booth right now, bro? And he went in the booth and killed it. He brought a whole new dimension to Full-Time Soldiers. Now, he brought this whole player, smooth, playboy aspect to the crew. And he was dope. He was so dope, man. before Macklemore. Birdie was going to be the one.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, he's the dopest rapper to ever come out of Seattle. Birdie was killing it, man, killing it. And then cancer happened. When Bird got his cancer surgery in 2011, they prescribed him OxyContin, and that was kind of the thing that sent his whole life into a tailspin, was getting hooked on OxyContin and trying to battle that. The cancer came back, and when it came back, it had metastasized, and then tried to get him clean at the same time. He went to the rehab place to get clean and try to get healthy again, and some sort of negligence was going on in the facility he was at, and they weren't taking very good care of him, and yeah, he ended up going into a coma while he was there. They did a CAT scan and found out he was brain dead. So no, I was there up until like 15 minutes before they pulled the plug. After he died, I started calling around and started hitting up people that I knew he had been recording with, and started trying to just dig up any music I could find, anything that he had recorded that hadn't been released, and just whatever I could get my hands on, and put together that posthumous album for him. The album's called Bird's Eye View, but that song in particular was a dedication song that me and Critical decided to do for him. And that was the beautiful thing about that project, was everyone who worked on that project did it for free, because everybody loved Birdie, and everybody knew that this was a labor of love, and this project was to honor our friend. Bird's Eye View, definitely one of the hardest verses I've ever had to write. A lot of vodka